Hey, how's it going, folks? It's Juno here, coming off on the part 2 of the three-part from the last episode. Recording it straight away, so sorry if you've made comments or anything. I haven't seen them. I'm just gonna roll straight into it and hope it flies. So this is going back to the first point I made out of the three, which was this topic I wanted to discuss: arguments versus explanations. I struggled with this. Formal logic is kind of where we're coming from here. We're in the domain of formal logic, how we look at something and identify signifiers about it without really being overly using our discretion regarding the content itself. We're looking at the form. Interesting enough, there is this element that I found to be of, like I said, illuminating for me personally, because I think there's a lot of instances in my life where I've got into like personal conflict with individuals, perhaps on an incorrect supposition that they were doing one of these when I thought they were doing the other. All right, so let me break into this a little bit. In this example here, we're looking about arguments versus explanations. I'm not going to read it on the page. You can read it yourself. I'm not your dad, and you're not children. But you can see what's being proposed is that if you're already aware of the conclusion, the premises can either, like, they act as supporting mechanisms for what you already know. All right, so that's an explanation. You already know something, that the knowledge is already there, something has already been proven to a degree, and you're just finding a support for that proof, something that sort of explains why that proof exists. Now, the opposite, this alternative here, arguments, is different in that you have yet to come to a conclusion. Like, this is the issue. It's the direction with which you are approaching the problem. You're approaching the problem. When it's an explanation, you have the conclusion. You're looking for some reason why the conclusion would be that way. When you're making an argument, you're observing things and drawing conclusions from these observations in some way. Now, in any part of this, there could be a fault. So I'm not saying that every time you follow one, it will be another. But what I am saying is this is the normal format, and this is kind of a way to address it and look at it. And the reason I want to discuss this at any length isn't necessarily because of the formal logic elements of it. It's because of its application in life, where, like I said, in my own position, I would look at people who are actually making, like, intentionally false explanations that I would then believe was some kind of distorted argument. And then there would involve a conflict. And the conflict was entirely based upon my lack of apprehension of their true meaning. And I'll say this, like, if you're joking, if you got some banter with your friends, if you're just fooling around with your buddies, and you insult them in a way that draws a negative conclusion immediately, and then says something that's like mirroring reality in some way to support it, though you understand it's a total exaggeration or it's a total lie, total fabrication, the other person, i.e. normally me, will then conclude that you're making an argument for me being a certain negative way or having some certain negative property, which then provokes me in some way to argue back or to basically fight you. And like, so this is pretty problematic, where there's a misunderstanding in exactly the format of what's going on, the formal logic. There can be some genuine conflict that arises from this, and I find it very surprising that it never dawned on me before that this could be the case. So it's just this idea that learning about formal logic has somehow illuminated, like I said, it's actually brought light to some things in my life that perhaps I was not aware of. It's funny, I opened my emails earlier and it was like, welcome to Google Analytics. And I just thought, this is basically philosophy for me. Like, philosophy it's welcome to life analytics. Welcome to just why things are the way they are. Here's some information into it. And you can use this information in all kinds of ways to build upon. And I'm curious, man. Maybe there's more to this, which is a common thought I have. I wish I didn't. I wish I had the opposite thought, like, nah, this is it. Move on. That would make life a lot more interesting. But maybe there is more to this. Maybe there's more to the notion that it's the application of formal logic that becomes the problem. And I have a genuine problem sometimes with even coming to terms with the notion that something said one way, but said a different way, has two entirely different meanings. Has two entire... I would always like to believe that it was just like so black and white, that the words are the words, intent has absolutely nothing to do with it. Intent does not direct the conversation, does not direct what's being said. And I suppose to a degree that's like a lawyer's perspective. Like that's the way someone involved in the law is going to look at things as in and of themselves separate and discrete, rather than contextual and systematized. Okay, well, that was my thoughts on that. You know what, I'm going to roll into the second video straight away. So the other talking point I had was, I've kept livestock. I've interacted with livestock before. And sometimes the weirdest things can make them suddenly react. I used to ride horses, and like a crisp packet flowing in the air could make a horse bolt. If it was just unexpected, a bin bag just rustling on the ground was enough to make a horse shoot off in the other direction, carrying you with him. So there'd be a genuine loss of control over something, a complete triviality. And I always found that very difficult to comprehend, how it was that the horse, being so, obviously so large, but he's not very intelligent, so he interprets things very differently to us. I mean, horses have intelligence. It's an entirely different type of intelligence. I've met some very cheeky horses who've had a mind of their own and were very determined to do what they wanted, and would find very, almost human ways, anthropomorphic ways of finding a solution to do that thing. So there is some intelligence there. Don't let me take it away from them. Animals absolutely have some level of intelligence. But it's you could just boil it down in that scenario to being something they're not familiar with, so being automatically concerned by it. Yet I've seen animals that are, when they find something unfamiliar, they just try and eat it. Like there's no fear response at all. They just try and consume it. Why not? So I'm not buying immediately that it's just this instant fear thing. However, like I said, I've kept livestock before, and sometimes you would use different tools, and there were some objects that even if they've never seen them before, some objects you could bring in and they would have like almost an instinctual hatred for them. Like they would just instantly dislike them, they wouldn't want to be anywhere near them. And this brings me to this whole cat cucumber thing. Right, so we don't usually expect cats to be involved in any way with vegetables. They don't seem the type. But yet we have these videos that we all laugh at, we find comical, is when you put the cucumber behind the cat and the cat sort of scopes it out of the corner of its eye and then suddenly looks or does a double take and then reacts wildly. And we all draw these like conclusions like, oh, it simulates a snake from their natural days back thousands of years ago, or it's something. How do we know? Okay, we can't ask the cat what it is they're scared of. We can't ask why they react the way they do. We might be right. All right, let's say there's something. None of them have ever seen a goddamn snake in their life, or very few of them have. So how do they know to react in that way? And if that can cause such a vicious reaction, such a ferocious activity, is there something that perhaps even exists in our minds, in our brains, on some level of unperceivable programming, that we would instantly react to something, and maybe it wouldn't be like jumping across the room and flying around, but maybe it'd be something, just a little tick in our mind, that we just, oh, something just changed. I just now think of it differently. Or, I'm now going to act differently in accordance to what I've seen that triggered this. Just something very small. It doesn't have to be so immediate and dangerous and exaggerated like the cat's reaction, but something very small. And what if somebody knew how to do that? What if they knew how to get that reaction out of us by using this little trigger that exists in our base programming that we're totally unaware of? I did a video on this a very long time ago about a human kill switch, that maybe there was something inherent in like biological program that we just don't know about that would instantly kill us. Like it would just switch us straight off, and we just didn't know about it. It could be a word, it could be being touched somewhere specifically, weird I know. It could be exposed to a smell or something. It wasn't necessarily shutting us down in like seizing our organs up because they could no longer function because they'd encountered some toxic element in the environment. But if it's actually just something that was signaled, that signaled for things to shut down or to stop, or to just kill you off straight away. And I always thought that was a horrific thought, like horrifying to think that if I can conceive of it, and I can see that there are sometimes like signals that seem to have some effect, maybe that does exist. Yeah, so I'm not writing any horror stories. I know it's spooky October. I'm not writing horror stories, but I have considered this before, and I suppose what I'm thinking of now, in relation to these cat videos, is an extrapolation of that, but at a lower level, where actually the quick death might be some way like a relief in comparison, because you wouldn't have it in like continuously affecting you. But maybe there is something that's just a small signal, something that triggers us a little bit, but it has an immediate effect that we're unaware of, but is continuous. That would be quite concerning to me. I'm always ending my videos with how concerned I am. I'm really not that concerned, but I find it interesting. But for me, interest is too much of a positive term, because I love things being interesting. But there's like a dark interest. It's like this is interesting in a way that it actually probably I wish it didn't exist. But all right, enough of me gabbling on. Thank you very much for listening. Appreciate your time. Any questions? Let me know. Have a good one.